Hello and welcome to another fun-filled edition of Adam's Music Box. Not necessarily fun-filled because of part of the story, but certainly beauty-filled in terms of the music. Because it was on this day in 1979 that Donny Hathaway committed suicide after years of in and out from the music industry because of various unresolved mental crises and problems. But I prefer to remember Donny not for the ending, but for what he gave us in a few comparatively short years as an active artist. A lot of people know him for his wonderful voice, but he was such a great pianist, such a wonderful songwriter, and such an important arranger. I mean, his arrangements were all over a lot of the early work of Curtis Mayfield. He arranged compositions for the one of my favorite vocal groups ever, the Staple Singers. He worked with Aretha Franklin, so many legends. King Curtis, he collaborated with another favorite of mine, Leroy Hudson. But his solo albums are where we really got to see him bare his soul. Everything is Everything from 1970 was his first album, and both Leroy Hudson and Donny Hathaway himself collaborated on a hit that's been sampled so many times. It's one that makes you think, one that makes you groove, one that makes you dance. The Ghetto. Just a quintessential song and such an important sociological song for the 70s. Absolutely wonderful. And he went from strength to strength. His second album, which was self-titled, had so many wonderful compositions, most of which were covers, except Take a Love Song, which was co-written by Donny. Absolutely extraordinary. 72 marked the beginning of a long, long collaboration with Roberta Flack, and those two just, whether writing together or singing together, everything just worked perfectly. And if they did quite a few albums together, and I frankly would recommend listening to every single one of them. Now, his final solo album released in his lifetime is definitely his best, in my view, although they're all great. And this is 1973's Extensions of a Man, or Extension, singular, of a Man. And this has what I consider two of his quintessential songs. One is Valdez in the Country, which has been covered by so many jazz musicians, sampled in hip hop. Wonderful song. And the other is, I think, his absolute signature tune, which is Someday We'll All Be Free. Now, when you listen to that, listen to how smooth yet how complicated the chord changes are. The chord changes are so rich, and it's got that wonderful sound of surprise where you don't know where he's going to take you next. It's just such a great song. I mean, if he only wrote one song ever and never did anything else, that would have been enough. He would have been an absolute superstar of songwriting if he only wrote and performed that one song. Now, it was shortly after that album that he was in and out of various mental institutions, but he did at the very end of his life rekindle his relationship with Roberta Flack, and one of the songs that he did with her in his lifetime from the Flack album Blue Lights in the Basement is another absolute classic. That is The Closer I Get to You. Absolutely wonderful. So definitely check that out. And of course, posthumously, Roberta released some of the duets that she did with Donny on her 1980 album, Roberta Flack featuring Donny Hathaway. The Whispers, who I've talked about before on this channel, another wonderful group who were very close to Donny that performed tributes to him as well. Check out on YouTube some of his live footage performing because it's really when he was live that he just really went wild on the piano. Such a great improviser. You know, someone whose foot was frankly one part in the jazz world, one part in the soul world. And while his albums are generally succinct, when you listen to either his live albums, that many of which have been released, or his live videos that you can now find online, you can see just how great he is behind the piano. Absolutely wonderful. And while he had a sad end to his life, in a life that ought to have been longer, he left us with a lot of truly memorable and wonderful music. As always, like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Take care.